How's it going, everyone? My name is Jackie King, and today we're going to be installing coilovers on my E92 M3. The coilovers of choice for today are Bilstein B16 Damptronics, which are compatible with the factory EDC. For me, that was a very important aspect of the coilover. Most options on the market will be the KW-V3. They have their own DDC or the Olin's Road and Track. The reason I didn't want to go with those is because they don't work with the factory components. You would have to call a tuner to get your EDC coded out. So it was an easy choice for me once I saw that the Damptronics were factory EDC compatible. So we're going to begin the process by taking off the wheels, 17mm lug nuts. We're going to start disconnecting the sensors. We got a brake pad wear sensor to disconnect. You really don't have to fully disconnect them. I basically just disconnect them from the holders that are in the strut perch to allow it to flex so we don't end up tugging on the wires a little too much. And then we also have the brake hose. And then we're going to move on towards removing the sway bar link. It should be a 16 with a counter hold in the back. After removing a sway bar link, we're going to move on to removing the strut pinch bolt. It should be a 16mm on both sides. After taking out the bolt, we're just going to slide out this holder. This is basically what was holding all your stuff. And then we're going to get a chisel in here to separate the knuckle so we can start tapping this assembly down to release the strut. What I usually like to do is just spray some penetrating oil in there to help the process. I think we have to remove the tie rod. I think it's not giving us enough flex for the whole thing to come down. Should be a 21mm. There we go. Want it to fight us. Thankfully these rotate. Taking out the tie rod definitely helped. I think we're gonna be held up by the control arm bushings over here. So after taking out the tie rod and dropping it down a good amount, we're gonna move back to under the hood. We're gonna drop out the 3 strut mount nuts and the strut should come out. All right, so now that we're back under the hood of the car, we're just gonna slide off this connector. It just slides into the holder there. Pull up on this boot. Disconnect the connector here. Just pull up on it, it should come loose. Raise the car back up. Just have to be careful with the fender in a second. It should give me enough flex to come out. We're not scratched yet, but we are dangerously close, bro. Let me just rest for a second. Alrighty, well, after that went incredibly smooth. Everything that was previously discussed, just scratch that. You're gonna want to refer to the original Pedro video with the white E92 M3 where we dropped the center nut over here and let the spring come down. You could have done it the way we were just trying to do, but I just didn't want to be disconnecting all my control arms. But if you support the weight of the knuckle, undo the center strut nut, let the spring kind of disassemble itself with the jack, you should have enough space to compress the strut and pull it out. Basically like how we have it now, except the strut mount will still be attached to the car. So now that we're here, we are going to take our lovely chisel again and we'll spread the knuckle. And just like that, we got one right front stock strut. So we'll leave that on the cart here, match it up to our Bilstein set. Just keep in mind though, the left and the right are different from each other. It mainly just differs in the sway bar link mounting. So you're gonna wanna make sure you have one end. If you were to mix up the strut, you would end up with the mount inverted. This is the one that we're gonna be using. Now there are some components that we do have to transfer over from the stock strut over to the new one. Primarily it's just a strut mount. I was originally gonna run some camber plates to go with it, but we have a track event this Sunday and they probably weren't gonna come in time. And me being impatient and eager, I just wanted to go ahead and get these installed. So there'll probably be another video with ground control camber plates or Vorschlag, whatever, but that will be addressed at a later date. So today we're just gonna throw these in and see where that takes us. One thing I do like about these a lot is that there's not much height adjustment. Most coilovers you could like go all the way down, but I'm not really trying to go crazy low. That wasn't the purpose of this. I think if anything, this is gonna stay at relatively stock height, maybe 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch max lower. You know, I want it to be more functional. I also don't want to be cracking oil pans. Let's get to looking at how the instructions of Bilstein wants us to assemble these. There will be a link in the description for this. They also tell you how to route the cables for the EDC wires. Very informative. In the diagram, you'll see they marked what parts are OE. So basically you have a lower strut washer, the strut like support, the strut mount, the original strut washer for the top, and then everything else is, I assume B is for Bilstein. So you got Bilstein 12 cable ties you're supposed to use. We'll start disassembling the OEM one, and then we'll take the parts that we need. Here we have our handy dandy green machine. We're just gonna move on to compressing the spring so that we can remove the stock components for us to use. Just line it up. No one needs safety goggles when you have a cage. Got all the tension off. The center nut of the strut is going to be a 21. We have a pass-through socket here so that we can hold the center of the strut so it doesn't spin with us while we're moving the strut nut. Let's see what we have here. We got a 10 millimeter to counter hold the top. So once you get that loose, I like to move towards a ratcheting 10 millimeter wrench, and I'll just spin the center of it. To break it free, you're gonna wanna spin the big one, or else you're probably gonna strip it out. Once you start getting to the end, you're gonna wanna slow down unless you just don't care about your old strut and just want it to fall right to the ground. Nice and easy. So realistically, all we're gonna need from the old strut is going to be the lower strut washer, the perch, the mount, and then the upper strut washer. So basically these pieces. Oh, I can't compress it. Ah,
damn, son.
I don't know about this, man. It's stiff as fuck. I don't know anymore. Now that we are here, we've got our stock components that are to be reused. Again, lower washer goes under the mount, and then we got the upper washer, and that's basically it. I'm gonna try to adjust these lock collars to the same height left and right. That way we don't have to do too much adjustment in the car. Obviously there'll be some fine tuning. Probably not gonna get this right on the first try. I will probably leave this and make the alignment guy's life miserable. So here we go. We're just gonna take these spanners that are included in the kit. We'll see if we can unlock these. Hopefully without too much hassle. Put this expensive piece right on the ground. Okay, totally arbitrary. I don't want to go all the way low. If I'm looking at the strut with the sway bar link on the side, I'm just gonna set it up maybe 1, 2, 3, 4 teeth till the top or the bottom of the lower ring. And then we're gonna lock the rings there, slide the spring over, and install this into the car. It's not a perfect science. When you get coilovers, you'll usually want to get them corner balanced. Then the alignment guy will kind of make the final adjustments. I'll make sure this collar is there. That will help prevent your noises. Obviously, install the spring right side up. Can't install it the other way. Now with the strut mount, actually, with the stock spring, it has worn into this mount here. I think if you were using a new one, there's no real orientation. We're just gonna line this up so we don't have it sitting at like weird heights. Get the upper washer on. We'll use the Bilstein supplied nut. It's down a little more. Tighten her up in a second. Most aftermarket ones are 21, except this one's a 22. Or also 7/8. So now we're gonna tighten down the strut nut. The nut is a 7/8 or a 22 mil, and we're just gonna counter hold the center with a 7 millimeter hex. Just wanna make sure, yeah, my spring is still aligned with the mount. This is all good. We should be ready to go back in. So we'll just wanna guide the EDC sense connector through. Slide the spring in, watch out for your fender. And we're not gonna run into the same issue as before because it's a lower spring. You just wanna make sure you're all the way in, so just find a place to tap it, make sure it's seated. Do a physical check on the bottom. At this point, I'm actually going to throw my bolt back in just to lock the position of it. Don't forget your little wire clip holder. Tighten up with the gun real quick and do final torque checks at the end. Now that we have the strut back into the steering knuckle, we're just gonna get the screw jack under here. Now we're gonna start raising a screw jack to bring the assembly up as we guide it in. Now that we've got the strut into strut tower, start raising up on this control arm to guide the whole assembly up. One thing that you will have to pay attention to, we'll show you once we lower the car, is there's actually a dimple on these and the strut mounts, sort of like an alignment dowel. You just have to make sure that goes into the proper location. For better clarity, we'll show you once we drop the car, and then we'll also show you on the other side. So right now we're just aligning the dowels. A little too much tension right now. I tried. Once we have all 3 studs and the dowel lined up, just raise it up to the car, throw some of the nuts on, and we'll be able to drop the car back down. Strut bar is kind of fighting us right now. Okay, there we go. Now that we're back down on the ground, under the hood, we'll just snug up these 3 nuts. One thing you'll want to notice about these nuts is that they're actually shoulder nuts. These actually have to thread through the strut brace. So when you're tightening down, make sure it actually goes into the strut brace and it doesn't start getting pinned against the strut brace, or else you're not going to be able to tighten it down fully. You're usually not going to have a problem, but if you feel like you only get a couple of threads of engagement and then realize that like feels like it's coming to a big stop, that's probably the problem that you're running into. So just make sure you reline it up with the strut brace. Once the 3 are tight, we're gonna go back under the car. We're just gonna clip in our accessories again. So that's just going to be the brake line, our ABS sensor, and our brake sensor. And then we're gonna hook up our sway bar link, 19mm counter hold on the back side, 16mm nut up front. And after we hook up the sway bar link, we're gonna tighten down the tie rod, and then we're gonna move on to routing the EDC wire extension. So for this, Bilstein actually gives you very specific instructions on how to do so. So we'll refer to them real quick. Guide the cable from the bottom edge of the strut along the ABS sensor cable until range of plug housing box. Continue guiding between body post and inner fender into the engine compartment. The plug can be attached to the uprated coating of the sensor cable. Okay, all right, so in the kits that they give us, there's actually a cap for the bottom of the strut. That will pop into there. They give you some cable extensions to start routing this up into the car. Let's take this out first. They give you a bunch of assortment of zip ties, more cable. They have this cable hanging out the bottom of the strut. Just feed it through the relief slot on the strut. Put the cap on. They want us to follow the route of the ABS sensor. We're gonna end up close to here. We're gonna take a couple zip ties and snug it down to begin with. Now I'm not gonna tighten down any of the zip ties at first, just so I could get some final adjustments in. This is just to hold it loosely for now. Guide the cable parallel to the filler neck. How the fuck do they tie it so close is what I'm wondering. Oh. We'll just tie it down to the ABS sensor wire. Now on these connectors they provided, they have covers, so we'll just take them off real quick. Another one on the extender as well. So we'll just take that off. So we can clip this extender wire in, and we're actually gonna keep following the path of the ABS sensor up into the engine bay. Throw that in there loosely so we can grab it. We're gonna drop this down, and then we'll tie everything back up once we're back under the car. All right, so now that we fed the extender through the fender liner, we're gonna pull the wire up. And in the kit, they actually give you another cable. So we're just gonna connect this into it. Once we get that up, we're actually going to take out our stock connector now out of the little housing. Just a little grommet, pull on it, the whole thing comes out. And I'm gonna clip this back on, just for aesthetic reasons, I guess. Slide the stock connector back into its place. And then this little 2-3 inch adapter, or 6 inches, I guess. We'll just go and plug into there. And then the rest is basically cable management. The Bilstein instruction wants you to tie this along the windshield reservoir tube. Now the kit also comes with a really fancy zip tie that allows you to clip onto a stud. So it actually tells you to clamp it on to this grounding stud. We're actually gonna tie up down there now that we know how much slack we got. So we'll leave this here again for now. So now that we've got the top mostly buttoned up, we're just going to tie this as neatly as possible. Again, just following the path of the ABS sensor here. Snip off the tails. Don't accidentally cut the wire, I guess. Drop it back down and finish up under the hood. I guess the only real thing you have to watch out for is just to make sure these wires don't hang too low. You don't want them ending up on the exhaust manifold. It's not gonna look like the prettiest thing in the world, but as is usual with aftermarket parts, clip the tail to zip tie. That should be it for this side, short of putting on the wheel. So now we're gonna move to the right rear. So we'll get one of the rear shocks going. We're gonna start by disassembling the interior. In the back here, basically the shock is going to be behind this panel. So we're gonna be taking this panel off. To take this panel off, we're gonna start by loosening pop rivet here, here, another one here. We're gonna start by removing the buckle attachment over here, T40. Let's get the tension off the liner, get our cat's claw. Take out this center piece. All right, so now that we got all the pop rivets out, we're actually gonna take off the weather stripping over here and remove this centerpiece. This centerpiece basically overlays this piece, so just wanna be thorough about it. So these covers just pop off. There's Phillips head screws underneath, and then you're gonna have a couple pop rivets along here. They're pretty strong, so just get your cat's claw under them and start working them loose. Just wiggle back and forth. Should come out. We'll just get our Phillips head in here, release the 2 screws. The screws I'm just gonna leave in there so I don't end up losing those. Set this aside. Take off this thing. Boom. Set this aside again. Make note of the arrow. This wants you to install that arrow facing outwards. Take this connector off. Just pull straight up on it, it'll come right out. And then we're gonna start undoing this. Let me size check it. Oh, that's as good a fit as any, brother. Unless the 21 fits better. 22. 21 front, 22 rear. We can start undoing this. The nut on the shock is a 22 millimeter, and then the center counter hold is a 10 mil. So once we got the nut undone, take off our hardware. You gotta be careful when you take this off, because there's definitely been a couple instances where I take it off and I accidentally drop it and it falls into the body somewhere. We've been able to fish it out in the past, but it is a nightmare. So make sure you grab this fully, don't drop it in the hole. Now we're gonna move to the bottom of the car and start installing the shock and the spring. Now we're gonna raise the car even higher. What we're gonna do is basically loosen up the lower control arm, take out the shock, take out the spring, and go from there. One special thing to know, actually, so for these cars, the thread, there's no nut on the other side of this bolt. The thread is actually part of the control arm. So if you're looking at your car and you don't see a nut on the other side of this bolt, it's not messed up or anything, unless your thread's actually messed up, so. Start undoing the lower. Spring is gonna wanna make it come out. Just be careful. Okay, take out the shock, easy peasy. You're letting this control arm back up, just careful. You don't wanna cut the boot here. Yank this down a little more, take out the spring. To install the Bilstein kit, you're actually gonna have to tap out this cup. This cup is just press fit in. Just give this a couple taps, comes right out. Next, we're gonna be throwing in our spring. On the Bilstein instructions, it tells you that there are some parts that we have to reuse. Again, all the B is for the Bilstein stuff. The only thing it seems like we have to reuse for the rear springs would be the lower spring isolator. So we just take that off our lower spring here. And the tighter coils are gonna be facing up. General rule of thumb, you want the lettering to be facing up. So we'll slide this into, just make sure you're clocked all the way in. This portion is actually going to go into the frame, basically how the cup was. What we are gonna do is we're gonna try to set the height right now. Just going to set it to a middle point, actually. The front and rear seems like they have different length adjustments. So once we get it down on the ground, we'll be able to know more of where we should really set it to. This, I am going to set to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 threads. So the blue pad goes on the spring, and then they actually give you another rubber pad so that the metal portion that's in the car doesn't you know, give you a lot of noise, vibration, harshness. So now that we have the spring assembled, we're gonna raise this back up. Pay attention to these locators on the spring. You're gonna have a thinner tab and a wider tab. The wider tab is going to be outboard of the car, so just keep that in mind. All right, now that we got the spring half in there, we're gonna move on to our shock. Again, there are some parts that we're going to have to reuse. Seems like we're going to have to reuse the upper mount, the one that I said to be careful not to drop, a pass-through insulator, and then the bottom of that pass-through insulator. And we're actually going to discard the OE cup. The original shock hardware has a metal sleeve. This we are not going to reuse as the Bilstein one comes with one. Thread off the nuts real quick. There's actually two pieces. You're gonna have a rubber piece and the boot over it, so just make sure that you have both of them. Mine didn't separate, but you'll see here that it looks like there's one here, two separate pieces. And then we're gonna put the shock back in the car. So we're just gonna feed the EDC cable through. I take that back. We're gonna feed the shock through the control arms. And as we feed it through the control arms, just make sure the cable goes in there, just like that. I don't know what all that brown stuff is, but, and then we're gonna drop the control arm. Spring wants to come out, so a little bit of wrestling the whole time. Just double check that your spring hasn't lost its orientation in the perch. And then we'll get to tightening the bottom of this. I'm excited, dude. This shit's about to be fucking slammed, bro. All right, so now that we got the screw jack on there and we're loading it up, throw in our big bolt first. Maybe a little tricky, a pry bar will probably help so that we can pry it out this way. Nice green pry bar. It wants a little more. There we go. We'll just load it up a little more. So right now we're just pre-tightening. We're gonna check everything at the end with some torque specs. So back in the trunk of the car, we're gonna disconnect our EDC connector. I'll show you guys once we take it off how it's clipped on. Very simple. So we got two tabs, just press them on the side and pull out. What we're gonna wanna try to do is try to remove this. Might have to enlarge the hole. So we'll just get a blade and start enlarging this. Dude, I don't know, put the stock stuff back. I didn't know I have to cut my shit. The fuck? They can make such good rubber. Well, they can't make oil pan gaskets that don't leak. Now we got the stock wire out. So we gotta put on our stock upper isolator, washer, two nuts for safety measure instead of one lock nut. Why does it look crooked? Cause it was crooked. All right, so once we got the nut on, we're just gonna tighten it down. Supplied hardware is a 19 mil. Throw on the second supplied nut. Got that tightened down. We're going to hook up the connector that was provided to us. So what we're gonna wanna do here, we're gonna feed the connector through the shock grommet. Oh, there was a cover. Almost forgot about that. Arrow facing outboard. Now that we fed the wire through, we're just going to connect her up. And boom, all done. They give you some nice zip ties for cable management. Oh my God, these are too small. Bow. Now we're gonna move to the driver's side rear. Basically the same process. The assembly and disassembly is basically gonna be the same with the exception of the headlight level sensor. You're just gonna want to disconnect that. It should be 10 millimeters. Just make sure it's loose, and then we're not gonna be able to break it. Now we're done with the three other corners and we're gonna get started on the left front one. Again, same as the rear. The only difference from left to right is going to be the headlight leveling sensor, 10 millimeter, and then you can counter hold, it's a 10 millimeter nut and you can counter hold the backside with 10 millimeter as well, and that should take it out. drop the car down, torque down on the wheels. There'll be some more impressions coming in the next couple days. We're gonna get the alignment, definitely recommend it. And then we're also gonna get the car corner balance. You know, the whole point of coilovers is to basically try to equalize the weight of the car in all four corners. A lot of people kind of use them just to go low, but the beauty of them is that you can adjust the height of the vehicle on all four to achieve a really good balance. Stay tuned for that, and we'll see you guys next time.